Evaluations are a very important component of any child's special education program. And there are several different types of evaluations. We're going to address the initial evaluation, the very first one.
That's right. So an initial evaluation is, just like it sounds, the first evaluation undertaken by a school district under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And basically what it means is it's the first time the school district assesses the child to ascertain whether or not they require special education and related services. The initial evaluation can be triggered by a request by either the parent or the school district, including the teachers working with the child. And parents should know that. I can't tell you how many times parents are not aware of their right to trigger an initial evaluation, to request that their child be evaluated for special education
Otherwise
services.
known as the referral to special education,
Right.
which can take place by a teacher, a parent, or the school district.
Right, exactly. And sometimes even an outside agency. So a child
yes.
receiving birth to 3 services
Right.
as an example, early intervention services from a state agency, those agencies often will make a referral to the school district prior to the child turning 3 to say, okay, the obligations are now about to transfer to the school district. I'm referring this child for evaluation. So it's that initial evaluation.
Right.
And really, special education and related services are not really supposed to be provided to a child until there's been an initial evaluation, which makes sense because how do we know how to educate the child if we haven't evaluated the child's needs, right?
Right.
So the initial evaluation has all sorts of timelines that are outlined, exceptions to the timelines, the way in which consent has to be obtained by the school district, the repercussions if that consent is not provided by the parents to the school district, in what circumstances that will create certain obligations and not others. It's a fairly tricky area of the law. And so I would say, it's not something I can quickly say, well, this is the law and it's really easy. On top of which, each state has a different way of establishing timelines. For some states, it's triggered from consent being provided. And that the evaluation must be completed. In some states, they actually require that once that consent is signed, the actual IEP has to be up and running within the timeline. So it's yet again one of those circumstances where you want to look at your state regulations and statute to figure out what timelines we're dealing with here, even though the IDEA does specify a period of time. So it's very important for parents to understand, because I hear this more than I'd like. Many parents have an unfortunate association with special education, and they refuse consent for the evaluation. They don't think that the issue is special education. They may have an archaic view about what special education is. Can't tell you how many times a parent calls my office because somebody suggested that they do so. And when I start asking questions, well, has your child been identified for special education services? The response I get is, no, he's really smart, which again bothers me on a lot of levels, because there is no requirement in most of the eligibility categories under the law that one be not intelligent in order to qualify for services. I represent lots and lots of really smart kids who also have disabilities. And so I have to explain that to parents. No, actually, that's not what special education is about. Special education is about, and I go through my explanation, but in the moment, many parents who don't talk to me just say, no, I don't want him tested for that. If what you're trying to figure out is whether he's special ed, I'm not providing consent for that. Now, the school district would have the right to try to force that evaluation through the procedures outlined under the due process procedures. Interestingly, though, under the 2004 IDEA, the school district cannot force a parent to accept special education services. So even if the school district is able to obtain that evaluation and it reveals that the child should be identified or meets the criteria to be eligible under the IDEA, the school district has to have the parent's consent to provide the services. The parent can say, no, I don't want them, and the school district is sort of stuck at that point. They can't enforce it.
Clearly, there's not a lot to know about the initial evaluation,
Right.
but if I had to boil it down, okay, the initial evaluation is that very first evaluation, which should determine whether or not your child is eligible for special education. It doesn't necessarily have to happen when your child is young. It can you can be
14.
You could be 14, 15, 16 years old, and for a particular reason become eligible.
Right.
For example, if a child has or a student has gone through an emotional situation where they end up in a psychiatric hospital for one reason or another, there may be a referral
brain
to
injury.
Right, a referral to special education at that point. So, but regardless of your age, it's that very first evaluation which determines eligibility.
That's right.